My Camino story begins as a pastor, leading church groups to the Holy Land, Egypt, Italy, and Turkey. In a bookstore in Istanbul, I saw the Turkish translation of the book The Alchemist by Brazilian author Paulo Coelho. When I returned to the US, I devoured the book, which seemed to summarize a gnawing personal need: my hunger for adventure. The story is about a shepherd boy named Santiago who travels across the Mediterranean to find a treasure. I soon was reading all of Coelho's books, and when I found his book, The Pilgrimage, I immediately knew I would have to explore its subject, the Camino de Santiago. In 2008, after nearly 16 years of yearning and planning, I walked my first Camino. I was hooked. Every summer I walked, first in Spain and then in Italy. I soon was writing guidebooks, my first one on the Way of St. Francis, from Florence to Assisi and Rome. Then I jumped at the opportunity to write Cicerone Press's new Camino Frances guidebook. As part of my agreement, I asked if I could write the new Via Francigena guidebook series. I had already walked about half of the route, and I was in love. It was everything I liked about the Camino de Santiago and more. I was so impressed I went home and told my wife we were moving to Italy. Her response was encouraging. In the Middle Ages, roughly the 4th through the 15th centuries, there were three premier pilgrimage destinations: Santiago, Rome, and Jerusalem. Our modern understanding of these pilgrimages is based on documentary evidence. The Camino Frances is based on the Codex Calixtinus from the 12th century. The Via Francigena north of Rome is based on the itinerary from Rome to Canterbury by Archbishop Sigeric in the year 990. The Via Francigena south of Rome is based on an anonymous itinerary from the 4th century of a pilgrim from Bordeaux who traveled overland to the Holy Land, returning across the Adriatic to follow the Italian peninsula to Rome and beyond. For historic routes like this, historians identify the towns from their ancient names, and then organizations map out walking trails between their modern counterparts. So this route dates from journeys that occurred from 1,000 to 1,700 years ago. The route now totals 3,200 kilometers. It begins in Canterbury, continues through Rome, and then finishes at the tip of the heel of the boot of Italy at Santa Maria di Leuca. It transits 4 countries, a 5th if you count the Vatican, and crosses 4 mountain passes. It touches 5 seas, including over 100 kilometers on the Adriatic, and it passes through 12 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. My books are the official English language guidebooks and begin with Part 1, Canterbury to Lausanne, Switzerland, Lausanne across the Great St. Bernard Pass to Italy as far as Lucca is covered in Part 2. Part 3 spans from Lucca to Rome, the most popular part of the itinerary. Part 4 consists of the stages south of Rome in Lazio, Campania, and Puglia, ending at Santa Maria di Leuca. So, why am I in love with the Via Francigena? I think, in part, it's the shepherd boy named Santiago inside of me who is thrilled with the idea of an adventure. I also love to experience new cultures. I'm fascinated with history, and there's a lot of it here. I'm a person of faith, so I'm always interested in how people worship, as well as their saints and stories. Someone once said that pilgrimage made Europe, and I can tell that's true. Crossing borders and seas and rivers, I can see the dynamism of a continent of nations becoming a people together in the European Union. I invite you to see the Via Francigena for the next 18 minutes through my eyes, in 3 to 4 photos from each day of the walk's 150 stages. I think you'll join me in appreciation for 3,200 kilometers of natural and cultural beauty.